Hello, and welcome back. I'm so glad you are here. Today, we're diving into a subject that touches the lives of many women, yet is rarely spoken about openly. Every daughter raised by narcissistic parents carries invisible imprints. Some of them may appear as insecurities, some as unusual strengths, and some as patterns you can't quite explain. But as Carl Jung taught, what remains unconscious will rule our lives until we bring it into awareness. In this video, we'll uncover the hidden cost of narcissistic parenting and the priceless lessons every daughter eventually learns. This isn't about blame, it's about awakening. It's about seeing yourself more clearly and understanding the roots of your unique inner journey. So stay with me, because what we uncover today might just help you reclaim your voice and your power. There is something profoundly unsettling that I continue to witness in counseling sessions. Men who, on the surface, appear grounded and accomplished. Men who work hard, build careers, provide stability, and check every visible box of what society would call a successful life, yet, beneath this exterior, a quiet tragedy unfolds. They apologize, not for mistakes, not for wrongdoing, but for existing. They apologize for feeling hungry, as though their basic needs were an inconvenience. They apologize for being tired, as if rest were a crime against productivity. They apologize for having emotions, as if sadness, frustration, or vulnerability were evidence of failure. And what unsettles me most is not their apology itself, but the invisible history behind it. A history that taught them their worth was conditional, that their humanity, raw, imperfect, and real, was something to be excused, softened, or erased. It is here, in these small but piercing apologies, that I see the deeper wound, the erosion of self-trust, the collapse of the inner voice that should say, "I am allowed to exist as I am." What looks like politeness or humility is often a mask concealing shame, a pattern etched deep into the psyche. And until that pattern is named, seen, and healed, no amount of outward success can silence the quiet, relentless whisper, "I don't deserve to take up space." And when I ask them why they do this, the answer is almost always the same. "I don't know. I've always been like this, but I do know." Because after decades of listening, observing, and sitting with men who carry this quiet burden, a disturbing truth has become clear. These aren't quirks of personality. They aren't harmless habits or endearing traits. They are scars, invisible. Scars left by families where love was never free, but conditional, where affection had to be earned, where approval was given in exchange for compliance, and where the child learned, often without words, that to exist as they are was too much or not enough. These men grew up in environments where love was a currency, not a gift. And like any currency, it had rules, conditions, and costs. They learned to pay for belonging with obedience, to trade authenticity for acceptance, and to bury their true emotions so they wouldn't risk rejection. The result? An adult who doesn't even realize he apologizes for his hunger, his exhaustion, his very feelings. An adult who unconsciously repeats this early contract in his adult relationships, choosing partners who withhold love, who demand emotional payment, who recreate the same cycles of conditionality. This is why the wound is so insidious. It shapes not only how you love others, but how you allow yourself to be loved. It shapes why you feel drawn to people who cannot give you what you deserve, because the child within you still believes love must be paid for. And so, what appears as humility is really fear. What looks like kindness is really survival. And what you call just how I've always been is in fact a learned scar, etched into the unconscious, replaying the same lesson until you finally dare to see it for what it is. If you constantly feel the need to prove yourself, if calm, steady love makes you nervous, if something inside you tenses the very moment someone offers you sincere compassion, then what I want to share with you today is not just another psychological observation. It is a set of puzzle pieces that can help you finally see the bigger picture, because the truth is, your relationships often feel like emotional battlegrounds, not by accident, but by design, a design written long ago in the quiet corridors of your childhood home. Jung explained that the unconscious repeats what has not been resolved. So when love was conditional, measured out in approval, silence, or criticism, your psyche learned to associate intimacy with danger. It learned that love is never free, that belonging must always be earned. This is why calm love feels unsettling, why sincerity feels suspicious, why you brace yourself when compassion arrives, waiting for the hidden cost. It's not that you don't want to be loved, it's that a deeper part of you doesn't yet believe love can exist without pain, and so, you unconsciously turn every relationship into a battlefield, fighting for scraps of validation, fighting against rejection, fighting even when no enemy is there because your nervous system only feels safe in the familiar, and the familiar was struggle. But here's the key. What looks like failure in your relationships is actually a map. Each fight, each disappointment, each collapse is the unconscious calling you back to the wound.to, the place where love was first distorted.to, the shadow you've never dared to face. Only when you see it clearly can you step out of the battlefield and into something new, into a love that doesn't need war to exist. What I've come to understand is that these patterns are not coincidences. They are not random flaws, and they are certainly not harmless quirks of your personality. They are the direct result of a very specific kind of emotional conditioning, a conditioning so subtle, so deeply woven into your early experiences, that you never even realized it was happening. It began long before you had the words to describe it, before you could question it, before you could resist it. As a child, your nervous system learned to adapt to the emotional climate of your home. If love was conditional, you learned to perform. If anger was constant, you learned to shrink. If affection was unpredictable, you learned to remain hyper-alert, and the mind, faithful to survival, recorded these lessons as unshakable truths. Not truths about your parents, but truths about yourself. I must earn love, I am safest. When unseen, my needs are dangerous. Decades later, these early imprints have not disappeared. They have simply gone underground, buried in the unconscious, where they quietly script the choices you make in love, in trust, and in how much you allow yourself to be seen. This is why you might find yourself drawn to people who withhold, criticize, or remain emotionally unavailable. Not because you consciously want that pain, but because your inner world still whispers. This is what love feels like. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. These patterns are not fate. They are echoes of old conditioning. And the moment you begin to see them clearly, you open the door to rewriting the story. Because here's the thing. In the brain of a child raised by narcissistic parents, something profound takes place. It isn't just about learning bad habits or absorbing critical words. It's about survival. The child's nervous system is programmed not for growth, not for curiosity, not for joy, but for permanent emotional survival. Every glance, every silence, every shift in the parent's mood becomes a signal to decode. The child learns to monitor the atmosphere like a soldier in a battlefield. Is it safe to speak? Do I need to disappear? Can I ask for what I need, or will that trigger anger? This survival programming runs deeper than thought. It becomes etched into the body. The heart beats faster at conflict. The stomach knots at disapproval. The voice trembles when trying to assert a boundary. And here's the crucial part. This program does not automatically shut off when you turn 18. It does not disappear with adulthood, success, or independence. Instead, it becomes your default operating system. It shapes the way you navigate the adult world, and nowhere more painfully than in intimate relationships. Love, for you, may not feel like ease or safety. It feels like vigilance. It feels like waiting for the ground to crack beneath your feet. It feels like bracing for disappointment, because your body still believes that's what love is. Carl Jung once wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent," and this is precisely what happens here. The nervous system, once wired for survival in childhood, continues to repeat its programming in adulthood. You don't consciously choose it, it chooses you. Until one day, you see the pattern and dare to break it. Think about it for a moment. Your emotional GPS was calibrated in hostile terrain. You learned to navigate in a world where love was conditional, affection was unpredictable, and safety could vanish in an instant. Now, decades later, you're walking through the landscape of closeness and love, but your system is still running the old map. It still scans the horizon for threats that no longer exist. It still anticipates betrayal, even when no betrayal is coming. It still prepares for battles, even in moments of peace. This is why calm love can feel unsettling. Why you sometimes feel restless in safety, as though waiting for the other shoe to drop. Why your body tenses in moments of intimacy, even when your mind says, "This is good, this is safe." Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between past and present. It carries the imprint of the battlefield and plays it out on the terrain of your adult relationships. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's what's happening here. The unconscious program of survival, written in childhood, keeps repeating itself in adulthood, and unless you stop to rewrite the map, you'll keep circling the same emotional landscapes, wondering why love feels so exhausting. The result is a kind of emotional exhaustion that wears the mask of vigilance. You don't call it exhaustion, though. You call it being careful. You call it being attentive. You call it being responsible in love. But beneath that constant alertness lies fatigue, the kind of fatigue that comes from scanning for danger that isn't there, from bracing for storms that never arrive. This is what I want to show you now. Through years of listening, observing, and walking alongside people shaped by narcissistic parents, I've identified 7 recurring patterns, 7 concrete ways that early conditioning writes itself into your adult love life. And here's what I ask of you. As you listen to each one, don't just ask, "Is this me?" Ask, "How does my body respond?" Because sometimes the truth doesn't appear as words in the mind, but as a knot in the stomach, a tightening in the chest, or a sudden urge to look away. Your body remembers what your mind has tried to forget. And if any of these patterns resonate, let that reaction be your compass, not to shame you, but to guide you toward awareness, because awareness is the first step in loosening the grip of conditioning that was never yours to carry. This isn't about being talkative. It's not about being chatty, friendly, or having a lot to say. It's about the inability to let yourself simply exist without justifying it. You know this pattern if you've ever written long, winding messages where a single yes or no would have been enough. You know it if you've ever explained and re-explained a decision not because someone asked, but because something inside you whispered, "They won't understand unless I defend myself." Every opinion feels like it must be framed. Every choice needs a footnote. Every feeling has to be cushioned with a preemptive apology, as if your very presence is an inconvenience that needs softening. This isn't communication. It's survival. It's the nervous system of a child who learned long ago that love was conditional. That attention had to be earned. That approval was never free but always came with questions, criticism, or withdrawal. So now, as an adult, you over-explain not because people demand it, but because your body remembers the danger of not doing so. You learn to defend your existence before anyone could attack it, to soften your voice before anyone could call you too much, to apologize before anyone could punish you for simply being human. And here is the tragedy. You don't even realize how exhausting it is until you meet someone who doesn't make you explain. A friend, a partner, a mentor who hears you say, "I'm tired," and simply nods, no raised eyebrow, no silent judgment. In that moment, you realize how much of your life has been spent performing invisible speeches in courtrooms that exist only in your mind. Carl Jung might say this: "The compulsion to endlessly explain is the shadow of the unloved child." The part of you still begging for permission to exist. But here's the truth. You don't need to explain your hunger. You don't need to justify your sadness. You don't need to apologize for wanting rest. You were enough before the sentence even left your lips. That's not communication. That's survival. Your inner child learned early that a simple no wasn't safe. It wasn't just rejected, it could trigger an emotional storm. Tears, anger, withdrawal, cold silence. So you adapted. You learned that your needs weren't enough on their own. They had to be explained, justified, softened, almost begged for, just to be seen as valid. And so the strategy formed. If I just explain enough, if I give enough reasons, if I make myself small enough, then maybe, just maybe, I'll be acceptable. This is the survival script of someone raised in a household where love was conditional, where presence had a price tag, where even basic needs felt like negotiations. It doesn't disappear when you grow up. You carry it into adulthood, into friendships, work, and especially love. You over-explain not because you want to, but because your nervous system believes it's the only way to keep you safe. It's the child inside you, still standing at the threshold of rejection, doing everything possible to avoid being cast out. But here's the truth that your inner child was never told. You don't need to justify your hunger. You don't need to explain your exhaustion. You don't need to shrink yourself into acceptability. You are valid the moment you feel. You are worthy the moment you exist. What's fascinating and tragic from a neurological perspective is how this early programming shapes your ability to set boundaries. For most people, no is a complete sentence. For you, it feels like the opening line of a courtroom defense. You don't just say no, you explain why it's reasonable. You soften it so it won't sting. You twist yourself into knots trying to prove that your boundary isn't selfish, harmful, or unkind. But here's the truth your nervous system was never taught. A boundary is not an attack. It's not cruelty. It's not rejection. It's simply self-respect. Yet the child in you still remembers what happened when you said no in a narcissistic household. It wasn't honored. It was punished. Maybe through anger, manipulation, guilt, trips, or icy silence. So your body learned. No is dangerous. No means I'll lose love. No means I'll be shamed. And decades later, that conditioning lingers. You find yourself negotiating your own boundaries, watering them down, disguising them as preferences, apologizing for them before they're even spoken. But boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks. They decide who enters, when, and how not to shut life out, but to protect the sacred energy within you. Carl Jung taught that individuation requires a reconciliation with the self, both shadow and light. Boundaries are the living proof of that reconciliation. They are not about keeping others away. They are about finally standing with yourself, saying, I will not abandon me, even if you do. When you turn every boundary into a dissertation, you unconsciously invite others to question your right to say no. That brings us to the second pattern I call hypervigilant empathy. You have an almost superhuman ability to read micro-expressions, detect the slightest changes in tone, and sense tension in body language that others miss. To outsiders, this might look like emotional intelligence. But for you, it's survival. As a child, your nervous system learned that the smallest shift in your parents' mood could be the difference between calm and chaos. A raised eyebrow, a sigh, a pause in their voice. These weren't neutral. They were warnings. So you became hyper-attuned, reading the emotional weather long before the storm arrived. And while the skill once protected you, in adulthood it often becomes a curse. Instead of being present in relationships, you're scanning. Instead of resting in love, you're on alert. You feel responsible for the emotions of everyone around you. You apologize when someone else frowns. You soften your words so no one feels uncomfortable. You bend yourself into emotional shapes just to prevent conflict that might not even exist. The tragedy is that what looks like empathy is actually hypervigilance. And hypervigilance isn't love. It's fear wearing a mask. Carl Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This pattern is the perfect example. Unconsciously, you replay your childhood script. If I can predict and manage their feelings, maybe I'll be safe. Maybe I'll be loved, but the cost is enormous. You stop hearing your own feelings, you lose track of your needs, and you confuse peace with control. True empathy is free. Hypervigilant empathy is exhausting, and until you see the difference, you'll keep mistaking your trauma response for compassion. Before you even enter a room, you already know who's in a bad mood. You can sense who's tense. You can predict who will need something from you before they even ask. It seems like a superpower, and sometimes people even praise you for it. You're so sensitive, you always know what others need, you're so tuned in, but in truth, this isn't a gift. It's an early warning system developed long ago to survive in an emotionally unpredictable environment. Your nervous system was trained to detect emotional storms before they broke. Because as a child, peace or chaos never depended on you, it depended on the moods of the people who raised you. You learned that if you could read the smallest signs, a sigh, a glance, a silence that lasted too long, you might prepare for what was coming. You might stay out of the way, soften your tone, explain yourself before being accused, or try to soothe someone else's anger before it was unleashed on you. You learned that your parents' moods determined not just the atmosphere of the house, but whether you would feel safe or unsafe. And worst of all, you learned that you would often be blamed for things that were never your responsibility. So you sharpened this radar. You made yourself smaller, quieter, more adaptable. You became the emotional regulator of everyone around you. Fast forward into adulthood, and the same pattern persists. Instead of being at ease in love, you're scanning for danger. Instead of resting in connection, you're preparing for rejection. You believe you're being empathetic, but what you're actually being is hypervigilant. This is not empathy born of freedom. This is empathy born of fear, and it drains you. Carl Jung once said that what remains unconscious directs our lives, and we call it fate. This pattern is exactly that. Unconsciously, you're replaying the same script. If I can sense their emotions, manage their needs, anticipate their reactions, maybe I'll be safe. Maybe I'll be loved. But the cost of this constant vigilance is enormous. You lose touch with your own feelings. You stop listening to your needs, and you confuse control with love. True empathy feels free and nourishing. Hypervigilant empathy feels heavy and exhausting. And until you recognize the difference, you'll keep mistaking your trauma response for compassion. So you developed emotional radars meant to protect you, and they worked at least in childhood. They kept you safe, helped you anticipate the storm, and gave you the illusion of control in an environment where you had none. But here's what I've seen after years of working with people carrying this same burden. When you live in this constant state of alert, you can never truly relax in love. You're never fully present. Your nervous system is still scanning, measuring, preparing even when the danger is long gone. You become the partner who anticipates needs before they're voiced. You become the one who smooths conflict before it even begins. You become the one who adapts, bends, adjusts, shrinks. It looks like care. It even feels like care to the outside world. But in reality, it's exhausting. Because what you're really doing isn't loving, it's surviving. You're not asking, what do I feel? You're asking, how do I keep them happy enough not to hurt me? And here's the cruel irony. In trying to prevent conflict, you end up erasing yourself. In trying to avoid rejection, you abandon your own needs. In trying to be loved, you end up building a love that rests on hypervigilance, not intimacy. This is why so many daughters and sons of narcissistic parents describe love as draining, not because they don't care deeply, but because their bodies were trained to equate love with labor, love with monitoring, love with the unending task of keeping the other person stable so they themselves could feel safe. But real love isn't meant to be lived on edge. It isn't meant to feel like walking on glass. Real love has space for both people. And that's the space your nervous system has been too scared to allow until now. Intimacy cannot grow where everything must be constantly controlled. Which brings me directly to the third pattern, perhaps the most painful of them all, your emotional allergy to genuine tenderness. When someone is truly kind to you, when they offer affection, attention, or care without hidden motives, your body doesn't relax. It tenses, it braces itself, it prepares for the catch. Instead of sinking into warmth, you tighten. Instead of exhaling, you hold your breath. Instead of receiving, you begin to scan for what this kindness will cost you. This is not because you are ungrateful or incapable of love. It is because your nervous system was trained to associate tenderness with danger. In a narcissistic household, love often came as a transaction. Kindness came with strings attached. Affection one day could vanish the next, replaced by coldness, anger, or punishment. So as a child, you learned, tenderness isn't safe. It's a trick. It's temporary. It's followed by pain, and decades later, this wiring doesn't just disappear. When someone looks at you with sincerity, when they offer compassion without agenda, your body doesn't recognize it as safe. It recognizes it as a threat. You might find yourself laughing it off, or distracting with humor, or suddenly pulling away, saying, "It's nothing, I'm fine," but deep down, what's happening is this. Your inner child is whispering, "This is the moment before the storm. Don't trust it. Don't let them in." This is why tenderness, the very thing you long for, often feels unbearable. Not because love itself is foreign, but because your nervous system has confused love with loss, kindness with control, safety with danger. And until this confusion is gently untangled, intimacy will always feel like a paradox. The thing you crave most is the very thing your body resists. It asks, what's coming next? What's the price? What does this person want in return? This reaction isn't paranoia. It's the intelligence of trauma. It's the survival strategy of a nervous system that has learned not through logic, but through lived experience, that tenderness is never free. In families shaped by narcissism, affection was rarely unconditional. It was a tool, a hook, a leash. Every warm gesture carried a hidden clause. Every "I love you" arrived with an invisible string attached. Your nervous system remembers. It remembers the warmth that turned to withdrawal, the softness that hardened into punishment, the kind words that became ammunition in the next argument. So now, as an adult, your body scans every tender moment like a contract. What's the fine print? What will I owe tomorrow? You don't do this because you want to. You do it because you were taught over and over that love is dangerous, that every gift has a cost, that kindness is just the opening move in manipulation. This is why when someone today offers you tenderness, your chest tightens instead of opening. You expect the bill to arrive later with interest, and at the moment you least expect it. And here's the heartbreaking paradox. What should feel like nourishment instead feels like poison. What should bring safety instead brings vigilance. What should heal instead reopens the wound, until you can separate genuine love from manipulative love. Your nervous system will keep bracing for impact, unable to rest in the very thing it craves. That's why your body developed an alarm response to tenderness, as if it learned that kindness was never safe on its own but a disguise used by dangerous people to get close. And so, even now, years later, when a truly good person enters your life, your inner alarm system goes off, not because that person is dangerous, but because your body confuses tenderness with threat. Your nervous system, shaped in childhood, doesn't distinguish the past from the present. It only recognizes familiar patterns. The softness of a hand, the warmth of a gaze, the quiet care in someone's voice. Instead of relaxing into it, you tighten, you prepare, you guard. This is trauma's cruel trick. It teaches you to fear what you most long for, to retreat from the very thing your soul has been aching to receive. And so, Many daughters and sons of narcissistic parents find themselves in this paradox. They crave deep love, but when it comes close, their whole body screams, danger, not because love is wrong, but because once upon a time, love was the weapon that hurt them most. The good news is this: alarms can be recalibrated. Your body can learn to tell the difference between genuine tenderness and manipulative tenderness. It's not about forcing yourself to trust blindly. It's about teaching your nervous system, slowly, gently, repeatedly, that this time, kindness is real. This time, love is safe. What I've learned is that healing this allergy to tenderness does not begin in the mind. You cannot simply convince yourself that it's safe to be loved. You cannot talk your way into trust or argue against the alarm bells, because the alarm does not live in thought. It lives in your body. It lives in your nervous system, programmed long ago to treat tenderness as the prelude to pain. Healing begins when your body slowly learns to tell the difference between manipulative kindness and genuine affection. When it discovers, step by step, that not every smile hides a trap, not every gift demands repayment, not every hand extended in care will later become a fist, and this is not a quick process. It takes time, it takes repetition, and most of all, it takes patience with yourself. Each time you allow yourself to receive a small act of genuine care, a friend's kind word, a partner's steady presence, even your own gentle self-compassion, you are teaching your nervous system something new. This is safe. Each time you pause and notice, my body is bracing, but nothing bad is happening, you rewrite a piece of the old code. This is how the body heals, not in dramatic revelations, but in quiet recalibrations, not in one grand leap of trust, but in dozens of small moments where you permit yourself to stay, to breathe, to let kindness in without running away, and one day, almost without noticing, you will feel it. Your shoulders no longer tense when love enters the room. Your heart does not flinch when tenderness comes near. And you'll realize that what once felt like danger now feels like home. This brings me to the fourth pattern, one I find particularly destructive. The constant performance. Even when you are alone, you are still playing some kind of role. You rehearse conversations that may never happen. You rewrite messages 20 times before hitting send. You adjust your tone of voice, your posture, even your breathing, as if someone invisible is always watching. It is exhausting, and yet it feels inescapable. Why? Because in your childhood, being yourself was never safe. You learned early that love was conditional, tied to how well you performed, how well you adapted, how convincingly you met expectations that were never your own. So the mask became permanent. Jung called this the persona, the social mask we wear to be accepted. For most people, the persona is a flexible tool, put on and taken off as needed. But for the child of narcissistic parents, the mask fuses with the skin. It becomes so rigid, so ingrained, that even in solitude, the act continues. And the tragedy is this: when you perform for long enough, you lose touch with the one person you were born to be. You forget the sound of your own voice unfiltered, the rhythm of your own thoughts uninterrupted, the shape of your own desires unbent by others' demands. The constant performance robs you not only of rest but of intimacy. Because how can someone truly love you when even you no longer know who you are beneath the act? The body keeps score here too. This is why so many who carry this wound feel chronically tired, drained after conversations, tense even in silence. They are living on a stage with no exit, and the spotlight never switches off. But here is the deeper truth: that performance, exhausting as it is, once kept you alive. It was your nervous system's brilliant strategy to protect you in an unsafe environment. The problem is not that you performed. The problem is that no one told you the performance could end. Healing begins the moment you notice yourself rehearsing, adjusting, censoring, and gently remind yourself, I am safe now. I don't need to act. It begins when you take small risks of authenticity, letting your no be a no without wrapping it in apologies, speaking your feelings without editing them into acceptability, allowing your body to sit without adjusting for approval, and slowly, as the mask loosens, you begin to see glimpses of the one who has been waiting behind the curtains all along, your authentic self, the self Jung described as the true center of the psyche, the one who does not need performance to deserve love. You choose every word depending on who is present, not because you are dishonest, but because authenticity feels like a luxury you cannot afford. In your early life, being yourself was dangerous. Showing your true face meant risking rejection, risking harsh criticism, risking the cold message, repeated again and again. Who you are, as you are, is not enough. So you learn to calculate, to adjust, to sense what was safe to say and what wasn't. This wasn't a choice, it was survival. Jung called this constant adjustment the mask of the persona. For most people, the persona is temporary, a polite role they put on in public, then set aside at home. But for children of narcissistic parents, the mask fuses with the skin. Even when no one else is in the room, you still edit yourself. Even in silence, you perform, and over time, this performance doesn't just hide your truth, it makes you doubt whether your truth even exists. You start to wonder, what do I really want? How do I really feel? Who am I when I'm not being watched? This is why intimacy feels so difficult. Because intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires authenticity. But how can you reveal your true self to someone else when even you rarely allow yourself to meet it? Here is the paradox. The more you adapt to gain love, the further love drifts. Because no one can fall in love with a mask forever. At some point, the mask cracks, and the person beneath it longs to be seen, and that moment, painful as it is also the beginning of healing. Because it shows you that your soul has not given up. It is still asking, will you let me be real? Will you let me exist as I am? That's why you created different versions of yourself. The professional one, the social one, the family one, the romantic one, each mask carefully adjusted, each role rehearsed, and all of them revolve around one central, haunting question. Who do I need to be for this person to accept me? But here's the tragedy of this survival strategy. If you are always performing, you eventually lose touch with who you really are beneath all those masks. The more you shift, the more your center dissolves. You wake up one day realizing you've become a collection of roles, but not a whole person. Jung warned of this danger. He said that when the persona, the mask, becomes overdeveloped, the authentic self is pushed further into the unconscious. And the unconscious does not vanish. It waits, it protests. It leaks out in the form of anxiety, depression, exhaustion, and the silent ache of not knowing yourself anymore. This is why so many adult children of narcissistic families feel like imposters in their own lives. They can succeed professionally, maintain relationships, even look happy from the outside, yet inside, they feel hollow, as if life is happening to someone else, because the true self, the one that laughs without calculation, loves without fear, says yes without guilt and no without shame, has been hidden away for so long that it feels like a stranger. But here's the hope. The very fact that you feel this hollowness means your soul is calling out. It has not given up. It is knocking on the door of your consciousness asking, will you finally let me exist? Will you let me be more than just a role? And answering that call is the first real step toward healing. And here's something crucial. Mature love is not an audition. It is not a stage where you deliver your best lines, hoping the other person will applaud. It is not a test you must pass in order to earn affection. Real love is something altogether different. It is an encounter between two people who have chosen to be real with all their imperfections, gray days, and moments of raw vulnerability. It is not about charm. It is about truth. But if you've spent your whole life in performance mode, this idea can feel not only impossible but terrifying. Because your nervous system has been wired to believe that authenticity is unsafe, that showing the unpolished, unfiltered self is dangerous. That love must be earned with effort, proof, and performance. So when someone looks at you and says, I love you as you are, a part of you recoils. Not because you don't want it, but because you don't trust it. This is one of the deepest wounds carried by daughters and sons of narcissistic parents. They were raised in a system where love was conditional, affection was transactional, and approval was a prize, not a birthright. And so, they became actors in their own lives. Brilliant actors, yes, but always afraid the mask might slip. Yet here is the paradox. The very love you crave cannot be reached through performance. It waits for you in the one place you've been most afraid to go, behind the mask, where your laugh is unfiltered, your tears are unashamed, and your presence is unapologetic. That is where love meets you, not as a polished character, but as the full, messy, radiant self you've been hiding all along. This brings me directly to the fifth pattern, one I call the silent epidemic of apologizing. And I don't mean apologizing when you've genuinely made a mistake. I mean apologizing for simply being, for being hungry, for being tired, for having a different opinion, for crying, for laughing too loud, for taking up space in this world. I've seen men apologize for the weather when it rains. I've seen women apologize for existing in someone else's line of sight. This constant reflex to say I'm sorry is not humility. It is survival. A child raised in a narcissistic family system quickly learns that their very presence is an inconvenience, that their needs are interruptions, that their emotions are burdens. So they shrink and they learn to preemptively soften every step with an apology. And here's the tragedy. Years later, as adults, they carry this reflex into their careers, their friendships, and most painfully, their love lives. Every time they apologize for being tired, for needing rest, for disagreeing, for speaking too loudly, what they are really saying is, please don't punish me for being myself. Carl Jung once observed that the psyche always remembers what the child endured, even when the conscious mind tries to forget. This endless apologizing is the psyche's echo of those years. It's the voice of a child who learned that survival depended on being invisible, agreeable, and small, but the truth is, apologies lose their meaning when they become your default language. Instead of showing humility, they become confessions of shame. Shame for existing, shame for feeling, shame for needing. And if you recognize yourself here, take a deep breath. Because the first step in healing is noticing. Noticing how often those words leave your lips. Noticing how many times you apologize not for hurting someone, but simply for being someone. This isn't weakness. It is the remnant of an old contract with survival. And like every old contract, it can be rewritten. I've seen them apologize for mentioning their own accomplishments. I've watched them apologize for needing time to process their emotions. And every time that happens, what I really see is not a man in front of me, but a boy frozen in time, a boy who learned that his very existence is a burden, something that constantly needs to be explained, justified, softened. But here's what many don't realize. This apology reflex isn't politeness. It isn't humility. It is an unconscious confession of guilt for existing. Because when you grow up in an environment where love is conditional, where affection has to be earned, and mistakes are magnified, you learn one devastating lesson early. I am too much. I am wrong for being me. So, you shrink. You edit yourself before you speak. You make yourself smaller in your own story. You apologize for your joy, for your sadness, even for your silence. And yet, Carl Jung reminds us that what we repress doesn't disappear. It hides in the unconscious and shapes the whole of our adult life. That endless apologizing is your unconscious crying out, please don't punish me for who I am. But here's the truth. Your existence is not a mistake. Your needs are not a burden. Your emotions are not inconveniences. And the moment you stop apologizing for them, you begin to reclaim the life that was always meant to be yours. When you keep apologizing for who you are, you teach others to treat you as someone who is worth less. You reinforce the message you internalized as a child that you are not enough the way you are, that your presence demands an explanation, that your needs are too much, which leads me to the sixth pattern, perhaps the most contradictory and self-sabotaging of them all, the craving for love from those least able to give it. I've seen this countless times. A man or woman who feels drained, undervalued, unseen, yet their heart chases after the same kind of people who recreate that wound all over again. Why? Because the unconscious mind doesn't seek happiness, it seeks familiarity. And if the familiar in your childhood was neglect, criticism, conditional love, or emotional abandonment, then part of you unconsciously gravitates toward people who echo those dynamics. Carl Jung called this the compulsion to repeat. It's as if the child within you whispers, maybe this time, if I work harder, if I love better, if I become perfect, they will finally love me. And so, you choose partners who withhold affection. You pursue people who are distant or critical. You try to prove your worth to someone who can't or won't see it. And when they pull away, it feels devastating but also strangely right, because it fits the old emotional blueprint. The tragedy is this: you're not chasing love, you're chasing resolution. You're trying to rewrite history by turning rejection into acceptance. But in doing so, you stay trapped in the same cycle. The good news: what was once a survival pattern can become a conscious choice once you see it. You can begin asking, am I attracted to this person because they're truly right for me or because they feel like home in the most painful way? That's where healing begins, not in avoiding love, but in learning to differentiate between the love that repeats the past and the love that helps you grow beyond it. Your magnetic pull toward emotionally unavailable people is not masochism, even if it might look that way from the outside. It's familiar terrain. Your nervous system recognizes the pattern, the urge to conquer love, the constant struggle to earn it, the life of uncertainty over whether you're enough. From a neuroscientific point of view, what's happening here is remarkable. When love was inconsistent or conditional in childhood, your brain's reward system fused affection with struggle. Moments of approval became intoxicating highs, but they were always preceded by long stretches of disconnection, criticism, or silence. That unpredictability wires the brain in the same way addictive substances do. It creates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, the most powerful form of conditioning known. This means your adult nervous system doesn't just want love, it craves the cycle, the chase, the anxiety, the fleeting relief when someone who withholds suddenly turns toward you. It's not the love that hooks you, it's the drama, the uncertainty, the chemical surge that tells your body, this is what love feels like. But here's the tragedy: your body is wrong. This is not love. It's trauma disguised as chemistry. And until you bring this unconscious pattern to light, you may keep mistaking intensity for intimacy and chaos for passion. Jung would say, what you do not make conscious will control you, and you will call it fate. So when you find yourself drawn, again and again, to those who cannot meet you fully, remember this: it's not fate, it's not a flaw in you, it's an old survival program running in the background. And programs can be rewritten. Your brain has learned that love is tied to effort, that fear is synonymous with passion, that conquest proves your worth. So when someone offers you their love fully, gently, consistently, without drama, your nervous system doesn't recognize it as love. It reads it as boredom, as if something's missing, as if it's too easy, too good to be true. This is one of the cruelest tricks of early conditioning. You crave the very storm that once hurt you, because your body was trained to equate unpredictability with intimacy. The calm waters of healthy love feel alien, almost unsafe. Your unconscious whispers, if it's this peaceful, then surely it won't last. And so, many children of narcissistic parents end up sabotaging good relationships, not because they don't want love, but because their nervous system is still looking for danger, still expecting betrayal, still addicted to the chemistry of chaos. Jung would call this a complex and emotional knot formed in childhood that continues to shape adult life from the shadows. Until you unravel it, you'll confuse peace with emptiness and mistake stability for a trap. But here is the liberating truth. What feels like boring love at first may in fact be your nervous system adjusting to something it has never known: safety. And safety is the soil where real intimacy grows. It's as if your heart has learned a very specific language of love, the language of lack, the language of effort, the language of constant proving, and like with any language, once it becomes the only one you know, you struggle to understand any other. So when someone speaks to you in a new language, the language of abundance, of ease, of a love that does not demand to be earned, you literally don't recognize it as love. It feels foreign, uncomfortable, even suspicious. This is why so many children of narcissistic parents end up in relationships that feel like emotional battlegrounds. It isn't because they want pain or because they're broken. It's because their nervous system has been conditioned to believe that love must always cost something, and so they unconsciously gravitate toward people who demand explanations, who keep them on edge, who replicate that childhood atmosphere of conditional affection. Carl Jung described this as the power of complexes. A complex isn't just a thought, it's an entire network of emotions, memories, and bodily reactions that run your life from the shadows. Until you bring them into the light, they will shape your choices for you. And in this case, the complex of conditional love makes you feel at home in relationships where you must constantly prove your right to exist. But here's the liberating truth. What feels unfamiliar is not always wrong. That quiet, steady love that feels almost boring at first, that might be the first real taste of safety your system has ever known. And while your conditioned self says, "This can't be love," your deeper self is whispering, "Stay, learn this language. This is the love you've always deserved," where love is given in drops, and a part of you is always working, always proving, always waiting to be enough. The cycle continues because unconsciously, you are still trying to finally earn the love you never received as a child. It is the silent bargain of the wounded inner child. If I work hard enough, stay quiet enough, make myself small enough, maybe this time, someone will finally choose me. But what I've learned is this. The only way to break this cycle is through something that feels completely unnatural, almost contrary to everything you've ever known. It isn't trying harder. It isn't being better. It isn't polishing yourself into perfection. It is the radical act of receiving love without earning it. At first, your nervous system may reject this. It will feel suspicious, undeserved, almost dangerous. You may even want to push away the person who offers it because their love doesn't fit the old script you've memorized. And yet, this is exactly where healing begins. Carl Jung said that individuation, the process of becoming whole, always demands confronting the unconscious. For you, this confrontation is allowing love to arrive without a transaction, to sit with the unease, to breathe through the voice that says, "You don't deserve this," and instead whisper back, "I don't have to deserve it. I only have to receive it," because love, in its truest form, was never meant to be earned. It was always meant to be given freely. And when you begin to let it in, not as a reward, but as your birthright, the old cycle finally loses its grip. You stop chasing ghosts of the past, and for the first time, you begin to live in the present, loved, chosen, and whole. The seventh and final pattern is one I find deeply moving. Your great fear of becoming the very person who hurt you. For many daughters and sons of narcissistic parents, this fear is haunting. It's as if some part of you whispers, "What if I turn into them? What if the cycle repeats through me? What if the damage I carry is the damage I will inflict?" This fear is not irrational. It comes from a profound awareness of how pain is transmitted across generations, silently, invisibly, through patterns we don't even realize we've inherited. Carl Jung warned of this when he wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate, and so you live with this double bind. You long for closeness, yet fear it, because intimacy means risk. The risk of passing on the very wounds you swore you would never pass on. But here is the truth. The very fact that you are afraid of becoming them is already proof that you are not them. The narcissistic parent does not reflect. They do not worry. They do not question whether their actions harm. The child who grows up in their shadow, however, often becomes exquisitely self-aware, sometimes painfully so. Yes, you carry wounds. Yes, you sometimes repeat old scripts, but unlike them, you notice, you pause, you ache. And that pause, that ache, is where transformation begins. Jung saw this process as the essence of individuation. The moment you stop being unconsciously ruled by your inheritance and instead begin to live consciously, breaking the cycle doesn't mean being perfect. It means daring to bring light to your shadow so that what was unconscious in your parents does not remain unconscious in you. Your fear of becoming them can become your greatest compass. It can drive you to cultivate gentleness where they were harsh. It can inspire you to honor boundaries where they ignored them. It can push you to speak truth where silence once reigned. In the end, the cycle breaks not because you erase the past, but because you choose differently in the present. And every time you act from awareness instead of compulsion, love instead of fear, you write a new story, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. You live with a constant worry that you might come across as arrogant, that you might hurt others, that you might display even the faintest trait resembling the narcissism that shaped you. This fear is so strong it becomes a silent regulator inside you. It tells you to shrink, to step back, to dim your light. You avoid recognition, downplay your achievements, deflect compliments, and flee from situations where you might stand out. On the surface, this may look like humility, but underneath, it is something else entirely. It is the lingering echo of a childhood where standing out was unsafe, where your parents' narcissism cast such a long shadow that you swore to yourself you'd never, ever be like them. So instead of learning the healthy pride that comes from effort and growth, you associate any form of self-celebration with danger. You bend yourself into modesty, not out of balance, but out of fear. Carl Jung would say that this is the shadow at work. Your shadow carries not just the traits you dislike in yourself, but also the traits you reject because they remind you of those who hurt you. And so you exile healthy confidence, healthy ambition, healthy visibility, bearing them with the very same shovel you once used to bury your pain. But here's the paradox. When you bury those parts, you don't escape the cycle. You remain bound to it, defined not by narcissism itself, but by your desperate avoidance of it. Healing begins when you realize this. You are not your parents. Your desire not to harm already separates you from them. Your self-reflection, your humility, your capacity to pause and question, these are signs of wholeness, not arrogance. So instead of hiding your brilliance, you can begin to reclaim it, not as vanity, not as superiority, but as the natural expression of a soul no longer afraid of its own light. And maybe for the first time, you'll be able to stand in recognition without shame, to accept a compliment without deflection, to succeed without secretly apologizing for it. Because that is not narcissism, that is healing. That is individuation. The moment your authentic self, not your fear, takes the lead, because deep down you carry the belief that being visible is dangerous, that it might turn you into the monstrous parent who raised you, that your light could blind instead of guide. But here lies one of the most beautiful ironies I have ever discovered. People who are genuinely afraid of being narcissistic almost never are. The very fact that this thought occupies your mind, that you pause to ask yourself, am I too much, is proof of your empathy, your awareness, your capacity to feel with others. A true narcissist never asks that question. They never doubt. They never look inward. They consume, dominate, and demand without hesitation. You, on the other hand, live with a constant dialogue inside you, a vigilant self-questioning that ensures you do not cross into harm. This isn't weakness, it's conscience. It's proof that the wound didn't corrupt your essence, it deepened it. Carl Jung would say that the shadow is not destroyed by denying it, but by integrating it. By looking at your fear of becoming like them, you are already transforming it into wisdom. By trembling at the thought of repeating their cruelty, you have already chosen a different path. So instead of silencing your light out of fear, consider this. Your awareness is your safeguard. Your compassion is your compass. Your fear is not a curse, but the clearest sign that you are capable of love, responsibility, and truth. The very fact that you worry about being narcissistic proves that you never will be. And maybe now, you can stop hiding from yourself and finally let your light out into the world. True narcissists don't worry about being narcissistic. They don't question themselves late at night. They don't replay conversations wondering if they were too harsh. They don't lose sleep over whether they've hurt someone they love. They simply take. They simply act. They simply demand. That is what makes them dangerous. You, on the other hand, carry this fear like a quiet shadow. You hesitate before speaking, worried your words might wound. You shrink before shining too brightly, afraid it might look like arrogance. You soften your voice, lower your presence, and double-check yourself again and again. But here is the paradox. Your very fear of becoming like them is the shield that prevents it. It keeps you human. It keeps you tender. It keeps you connected to your capacity for empathy, your ability to feel, your deep desire not to repeat what once shattered you. Carl Jung would say that this awareness is not weakness, but integration. By naming the fear, by holding it up to the light, you turn it from a threat into a protector. It becomes not a chain around your neck, but a compass that constantly points you back toward your truest self. So instead of letting this fear silence you, let it guide you. Let it remind you that you are nothing like those who wounded you, because only a deeply feeling, deeply human soul could worry about becoming what it most despises, and that is proof enough that you never will. But when this fear becomes so strong that it paralyzes you, keeps you from shining, makes you invisible, then that very fear becomes a new kind of prison. It doesn't protect you anymore. It locks you in. It keeps you from stepping into the fullness of who you are, and here lies the heart of what I want to share with you. Recognizing these patterns doesn't mean labeling yourself as broken or defective. It means you are finally beginning to see the invisible threads that have pulled you for years. Threads you never chose, but that shaped you. Threads woven in the silence of your childhood, when survival demanded adaptation. You are not broken. You are conditioned. And anything that is conditioned can be reconditioned. Anything learned can be unlearned. Anything wounded can be healed. Carl Jung reminded us that what is not made conscious appears in our lives as fate. By naming these patterns, by bringing them into the light, you interrupt the old fate. You stop the silent repetition of wounds. You begin to write a different story. And the truth is, every scar you carry is not just a wound, it's also a map. A map that points to where healing is needed. A map that leads you back to yourself. Because the same sensitivity that once protected you can now become your gift. The same vigilance that exhausted you can turn into wisdom. The same fear of becoming like them can become proof that you are nothing like them. You are not here to apologize for your existence. You are here to live it fully. And the moment you stop hiding, the moment you stop shrinking, the moment you trust that you are enough as you are, that's when the prison door opens. That's when healing truly begins. It means empowering yourself to choose differently, giving yourself the tools to finally understand why you react the way you do, why you choose what you choose, why you feel what you feel, because these 7 patterns are not flaws in your character. They are intelligent adaptations your mind created to survive. Survival strategies built in an environment where love was conditional, where your worth depended on whether you could keep the peace, make others happy, or silence your own needs. When you see them through this lens, something shifts. You realize you are not broken, you are brilliant. Your nervous system did exactly what it had to do to keep you alive. But now, those same strategies that once saved you are keeping you trapped. They no longer protect you, they limit you, and this is where your power begins. The moment you stop judging yourself for these patterns and start understanding them, you reclaim the choice that was taken from you as a child. You are no longer the helpless little one trying to decode the moods of a narcissistic parent. You are an adult who can say, I see this, I understand this, and I choose differently. Jung believed that awareness is the beginning of transformation. The more you bring the unconscious into light, the less it controls you from the shadows. And every time you choose differently, even in the smallest way, you rewire your inner system. You teach your body and soul that love can be safe, that tenderness doesn't have to sting, that boundaries can be honored, that you don't have to apologize for existing. This is not instant. It's not linear, but it is possible. Because those scars you carry are not the end of your story. They are the evidence of your survival and the doorway to your transformation. People who weren't able to be happy with themselves passed that burden on to you. And you still, a boy, did what every intelligent child does. You adapted. You didn't have the tools of an adult, the freedom to leave, or the power to change your parents. You had only what your young nervous system could invent in order to survive, and it was precisely those tools that saved you. They helped you navigate a home where love was conditional, where emotional survival required constant vigilance, where affection could vanish without warning, where authenticity was a luxury you couldn't afford. You learned to read faces like weather maps. You learned to anticipate storms before they arrived. You learned to shrink yourself so that your presence didn't trigger explosions. You learned to perform versions of yourself that were safer than your truth. And in that hostile terrain, these strategies weren't weaknesses. They were brilliance. They were courage. They were proof that your spirit refused to give up. But now, as an adult, those same tools that once protected you have become heavy armor. Armor that keeps love at a distance. Armor that makes you doubt tenderness. Armor that convinces you that your needs must always be explained, justified, or apologized for. The good news is this: armor can be laid down. Scars can become stories of strength. And the child who survived can give way to the adult who finally learns to live. But now you're an adult. And the very tools that once kept you safe have become the same chains that hold you back from living freely. The hypervigilance that once protected you in a chaotic home has morphed into anxiety in your relationships. Your nervous system still scans every room, every tone, every glance, searching for storms that aren't there. Instead of peace, you live on alert. The constant explaining that once shielded you from blame has hardened into an inability to set clear, unapologetic boundaries. No longer feels like a full sentence. It feels like the beginning of a trial, a justification, a performance where you must prove you are not selfish, not unkind, not too much, and the performance that once made you acceptable has become the very wall that blocks real intimacy. You've perfected the art of being likable, agreeable, competent, but at the cost of being fully known. And when no one sees the real you, how can you ever feel truly loved? This is the cruel paradox of survival strategies. What once saved you now suffocates you. Your nervous system hasn't updated its map. It doesn't know the war is over, but here's the truth. The war is over. You are no longer a child who must perform to survive. You are an adult who deserves to live, to love, and to be loved without apology. But what I've learned after decades of work is this: healing is not an exorcism. It is in the dramatic moment when every trigger disappears and you become a new person overnight. Healing is quieter and far more powerful. It begins when you recognize a pattern as it rises, meet it with gentleness, and choose one different response, again and again, until the nervous system learns a new way to be. Healing means you don't wage war on your survival strategies, you retrain them. Hypervigilance becomes discernment, over-explaining becomes a clear boundary, performance becomes presence. This is Jung's individuation in practice. Not rejecting the parts that once protected you, but integrating them so they serve your life instead of running it from the shadows. A simple, repeatable blueprint. Notice, pause, and name what's happening. I'm scanning for danger. My chest is tight. My mind wants to explain. Naming moves it from fate to choice. Regulate. Give your body safety signals. Feel your feet, lengthen your exhale. Look around and name 5 neutral objects. Let your physiology come back to now. Re-choose small. Swap the old reflex for a tiny new action. Instead of a paragraph, say, "No, that doesn't work for me." Instead of fixing a mood, ask, "What do I feel?" Instead of bracing against tenderness, say, "Thank you," and inhale for 2 slow counts. Repair, don't punish. If you slip into the old pattern, you're not back at 0. Offer yourself a brief repair. I over-explained. Next time I'll keep it to 1 sentence. Progress is built on course corrections, not perfection. Record the proof. Each evening, jot 1 line. Kept a boundary, let a compliment land, stopped editing myself. Your brain needs evidence to update its map. The war is over. Over time, these micro choices become your new baseline. The same system that once kept you alive becomes the scaffolding that lets you love, work, and rest without apology. That's real healing, not the absence of triggers, but the presence of self-steady, kind, and in charge. Building real relationships where you don't have to explain why you exist. Building authentic closeness where you are seen without costumes, without edits, without the exhausting performance. Building love you don't have to earn because it arrives not as a prize for effort, but as recognition of your essence. And here's what I want you to carry with you. If you recognized yourself in these patterns, it doesn't mean you are trapped in them forever. Patterns are not prisons. They are maps. They show you where you've been, but they don't have to dictate where you're going. You are not broken. You are not defective. You are someone who survived an impossible system, and survival always leaves marks. Those marks are not shame. They are proof of your strength. Carl Jung taught that what is unconscious will direct your life until you make it conscious, and that is exactly what you're doing now. By seeing these patterns, by naming them, you've already begun to loosen their grip. This is how healing begins, not with a single dramatic breakthrough, but with recognition, awareness, and compassion for yourself. So let this be your reminder. The very fact that you can see the scars means you're no longer controlled by them. The fact that you feel the weight of these dynamics means you're already moving toward freedom. And the fact that you long for a love that feels safe, steady, and unconditional means your heart still knows the truth. It knows what it deserves. Your next chapter isn't about fixing yourself. It's about meeting yourself fully, honestly, gently, because when you stop apologizing for your existence, when you learn to receive tenderness without fear, when you dare to live without performing, you discover something extraordinary. Love was never meant to be earned. It was meant to be shared. You are not too damaged to be loved. You are not beyond repair. You are not a burden that anyone has to tolerate. You are a person who endured something no child should ever have had to endure. You carried responsibilities, wounds, and silences that were never yours to carry, and the fact that you are here, still searching, still asking questions, still longing for real love, this is proof of your resilience, not your ruin. Now you stand at a threshold. For the first time, you have the chance to choose something entirely new, something that doesn't echo the chaos of the past, something that doesn't ask you to earn your place in someone's heart like an endless audition, because mature love exists. It is not the kind of love you must win through over-explaining. It is not the kind of love you must monitor with vigilance, terrified that one wrong move will make it vanish. It is not the kind of love that makes you shrink to fit someone else's shadow. Mature love is steady. It accepts without demanding perfection. It sees your cracks and does not weaponize them. It doesn't require you to sacrifice your authenticity in exchange for crumbs of attention. And perhaps the most radical truth of all, mature love begins with you, the way you speak to yourself, the way you keep your promises to yourself, the way you learn to stand still in tenderness instead of recoiling. This inner foundation is what will make every outer connection feel different. So, if you recognized yourself in these words, let this sink in. You are not broken, you are becoming, and what you are becoming is someone who no longer has to earn love, but who simply allows themselves to receive it, not the kind of love that requires you to hide who you are, not the kind of love that makes you apologize simply for existing. Mature love is the kind that sees you even on your worst days and does not demand an explanation. It doesn't withdraw because you are tired, anxious, or vulnerable. It doesn't punish you for being human. Instead, it recognizes your fear and meets it not with judgment or solutions, but with presence. It says, you don't have to perform here. You don't have to earn your place. You are already enough. This kind of love allows you to exhale. It allows you to be authentic without the constant fear of rejection. It gives you permission to stumble, to feel, to change your mind, to be imperfect, because love that is real doesn't require perfection. It requires honesty. It requires showing up, not as an edited version of yourself, but as the whole, complex, sometimes messy truth of who you are. And when you allow yourself to receive that kind of love, something profound happens. Your nervous system begins to soften. Your survival strategies lose their grip. The inner child that always feared abandonment learns, this time is different. This love doesn't vanish when I am real. That is the love Carl Jung spoke of when he reminded us that individuation, the process of becoming whole, is never about pleasing the world but about reconciling with yourself. And when you do, the right kind of love finds you not because you chased it, but because you finally became able to recognize it. Healing is that moment when you feel the old reflex rise up, the urge to over-explain, to defend, to apologize for your existence, and instead you take a deep breath and let silence be enough. Healing is when you notice yourself reaching for the mask and you choose, even for a single second, to leave it off. Healing is not a destination where you arrive fully complete. It is a daily practice of meeting yourself again and again with patience, with honesty, with compassion. It's the conscious choice to pause when the old patterns call, to say, this time, I will respond differently, and in those small moments so ordinary they might seem invisible, something extraordinary is happening. You are rewriting the script your nervous system was forced to memorize. You are teaching your body that safety exists outside of survival. You are showing your heart that love can stay without demanding performance, that kind of love, the one that honors your boundaries, that doesn't punish your wounds but stands beside you while they heal, is not waiting as a prize for perfect people. It is waiting for you exactly as you are, in the middle of your process, in the midst of your becoming. And the more you commit to these small acts of healing, the clearer your eyes become, the softer your defenses grow, and the closer you move to recognizing the love that was always meant for you. Trust that your no is enough. No justifications, no footnotes, no long explanations. Simply know and let it stand like a pillar rooted in the ground of your soul. Healing is also when your body tenses in response to a loving gesture, and instead of recoiling or withdrawing, you stay present long enough to allow yourself to be touched by that tenderness, even if it feels unfamiliar, even if every cell in you whispers, this is dangerous. It's when you notice yourself slipping into a role, shaping your words to fit an invisible script, and instead you reveal a piece of your true self. Even if your voice trembles, even if the silence that follows feels unbearable, these small acts may look fragile from the outside, but in truth, they are seismic shifts within. Each time you choose authenticity over performance, presence over avoidance, truth over safety, you reclaim a piece of your original self. Carl Jung often wrote that individuation is not a grand revelation, but a slow stitching together of the fragments of who we are. And that is what happens here. Every no, every trembling word of truth, every moment of staying present in tenderness becomes a thread weaving you back into wholeness. It's when you catch the apology forming on your tongue, the automatic reflex to shrink, to soften, to excuse your existence, and instead you say, I need this, clear, simple, without apology, without explanation. It's when you feel the familiar pull toward someone emotionally unavailable, that magnetic ache for the love you must fight for, and you consciously turn away. You turn not because it feels easy, but precisely because it feels foreign, unsettling, almost wrong to your nervous system, and instead, you take a step towards someone who is truly present, someone whose gaze doesn't shift away, someone whose love doesn't need to be chased, even as every part of you resists, whispers, this isn't love, this is too simple. Because you know the truth, it's not simplicity that feels strange, it's safety, and healing is choosing safety over drama, stability over chaos. Love that stays, even when your body is still learning how to receive it. Each of these moments, tiny, trembling, ordinary, are not small victories. They are revolutions. They are the rewriting of an entire childhood script that told you love must be earned through pain. Carl Jung would call this the conscious confrontation with the unconscious, the decision to no longer let the shadow dictate the story. And each time you do this, you are not only healing yourself, you are teaching your nervous system to believe in a new kind of love. And it's when the fear rises, that sharp whisper telling you, what if I become like the one who hurt me? For a moment, you feel the urge to shrink, to dim, to silence yourself so no one could ever confuse you with them, but instead, you pause, you breathe, and you recognize that fear for what it really is: proof of your empathy, evidence of your humanity. It is not a curse, but a compass pointing you back to your heart. You remind yourself, those who fear becoming narcissistic rarely are, because the fear itself is your protection. It is the thread that keeps you tethered to compassion. It is the reminder that you are awake, that you care, that you would never want to inflict on another what was once inflicted on you. So you let yourself shine, not in arrogance, but in authenticity, not to dominate, but to illuminate. And in shining, you see clearly that your light does not diminish the light of others. Instead, it invites them. It whispers, you too can shine. Each of these moments, tiny yet immeasurable, is an act of extraordinary courage. Because every time you choose presence over performance, clarity over apology, love over fear, you are choosing the unknown over the familiar. You are choosing healing over survival. You are choosing growth over repetition. This, Jung would say, is individuation in motion, the sacred work of becoming who you truly are, not a perfect self, not a polished mask, but a whole being, light and shadow, wound and wisdom, fear and fire woven together into a life that is finally your own. You are writing a new story, one your inner child never even dared to dream of. A story no longer built on survival, but on creation. No longer defined by the wounds of the past, but by the possibilities of the present. Your childhood with narcissistic parents taught you how to survive in hostile terrain. You learned to read danger before it arrived. You learned to shrink, to please, to endure. And those lessons, as painful as they were, kept you alive. But now, the story changes. Because survival is not the same as living. And what once kept you safe is no longer what helps you grow. Now you have the chance to learn something entirely new: how to flourish in a space of love, how to stay when love feels safe, not flee because it feels strange, how to rest without apology, how to speak without fear, how to be seen without performing. You are learning how to build relationships not out of fear of abandonment, but out of mutual respect, not through perfection, but through the beautiful imperfection of two people who have chosen to grow together. And perhaps most importantly, You are learning that you were never too much and never not enough. You are exactly as you are meant to be, a soul in the process of becoming whole. As Jung wrote, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become, and today, you are choosing to become more than your wounds. You are choosing to become the author of a new story, a story where love no longer costs your soul, but nourishes it. And I want you to know this is not only possible for you, it is your birthright. You have the right to be loved without conditions, not for what you do, not for how well you perform, not for how much you give, but simply because you exist. You have the right to take up space without apology, to breathe deeply without explaining yourself, to walk into a room without shrinking to make others comfortable. You have the right to set boundaries without endless explanations. Your no is complete. It does not need a dissertation, an apology, or defense. You have the right to be seen, truly seen, without masks or performance, to be known beyond the surface, beyond the roles, beyond the survival strategies. And you have the right to be valued, not for what you provide, but for who you are at your core. The love you are searching for is not a fantasy. It exists. And more than that, it is searching for you. It is the love that will not ask you to prove your worth. The love that will not punish your boundaries, but honor them. The love that will not silence you, but welcome your voice. The love that will not dim your light, but stand beside it, shining with you. Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and as you become, that love will find you not as a reward, but as a reflection of your readiness to receive it. But in order for you to recognize that love when it finally comes, in order to allow it to stay and not unconsciously push it away, you must do something that may feel like the hardest thing in the world. You must begin to treat yourself with the same tenderness you so freely offer others, the compassion you pour into friends when they're hurting, the patience you extend to those you care about, the soft words you whisper to calm someone you love. All of that must now turn inward. You must start speaking to yourself the way you would speak to your closest friend, the one who has lived through what you've endured, the one who carries invisible scars but still stands tall, the one who deserves gentleness, not judgment. Because here's the truth: if you cannot practice tenderness with yourself, you will not trust it when it comes from others. You will suspect it, resist it, doubt it. But the moment you learn to offer yourself kindness, your nervous system begins to believe maybe this is safe. Maybe love can stay. Carl Jung believed that healing begins with integration, with welcoming even the parts of ourselves we once rejected. This is what self-tenderness truly means. Not ignoring your wounds, not pretending they aren't there, but holding them softly in your own hands and saying, I see you. You are still part of me. You are still worthy of love. And when you practice this daily, bit by bit, the love you once thought was unreachable becomes something you can finally recognize, accept, and keep. You must begin to defend yourself with the same strength you would use to protect someone you love. Think about the way you would never allow someone to belittle your closest friend, how you would stand between them and the world if necessary. That is the same fierce loyalty you now owe to yourself. You must start to see yourself through eyes of compassion, the very eyes with which you look at others who've survived similar wounds. Because if you can recognize their pain and still see their beauty, then you already know how to look at yourself with the same grace. And here lies the deepest truth I've learned. You cannot receive love you don't believe you deserve. Even when love stands at your doorstep, if you secretly carry the belief that you're unworthy, you will close the door before it enters. Carl Jung once said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, and yet, this is also the most liberating act you can commit. The moment you accept yourself, the moment you believe that you deserve love simply because you exist, your entire nervous system shifts, your heart softens, and you finally allow love to stay. You cannot build healthy relationships while you are still trapped in a toxic relationship with yourself. It is impossible to offer stability to others when inside you live in chaos. You cannot give to others what you continue to deny yourself. Love given without self-love always becomes conditional, laced with fear, control, and exhaustion. That is why healing always begins with you, not with finding the right person to finally heal your wounds, not with hoping someone else will see the worth you hide from yourself, not with rehearsing better explanations of your needs. True healing begins when you turn inward and meet yourself, the frightened child who learned to survive, the teenager who longed to be enough, the adult who has carried invisible burdens for far too long. Carl Jung said, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens." This awakening is the starting point of love that lasts. Because when you no longer abandon yourself, you stop asking others to fill the void you never tended within. Healing is not about fixing yourself so you can be lovable. It is about realizing you were lovable all along and finally daring to believe it. Not with more convincing behavior to be accepted, not with exhausting yourself in endless performances to prove you're worthy. Healing begins with the recognition that you deserve love simply because you exist, that your worth is not up for negotiation, not in the eyes of your family, not in the judgment of society, not in the shifting moods of those around you, that you don't have to earn your place in this world. You were born belonging. Your existence is your proof that you, exactly as you are with all your wounds, your patterns, and your story, are enough. Carl Jung often reminded us that the task of life is not to become someone else's idea of perfect, but to become whole. And wholeness does not require polishing yourself into flawlessness. It requires embracing the cracks, the contradictions, the shadows you were once told to hide. When you stop bargaining for your right to exist, when you stop asking, "Am I good enough yet?" you step into a deeper truth. You were always good enough, and from that place, the love you accept, the relationships you build, are no longer rooted in fear, performance, or apology. They are rooted in authenticity, the kind of love that doesn't need to be earned because it already recognizes your inherent worth. And from this place of radical self-acceptance, from this solid foundation of self-love, you can begin to choose relationships that honor who you truly are, not the ones that demand you shrink, bend, or perform to be loved. The path to mature love is not perfect. It is not a straight line. There will be days when old patterns return, their voices louder than ever, whispering that survival feels safer than trust. There will be moments when the familiar melody of fear and defense feels more comfortable than the new, untested song of healing, and that is okay. Healing does not mean silence from the past. It means learning how to recognize its voice without letting it conduct your future. Carl Jung often reminded us that growth comes not from rejecting the shadow, but from learning to walk alongside it. And so, when you stumble, when you feel yourself slipping back, you are not failing, you are practicing. Each step, even the imperfect ones, becomes part of the sacred rhythm of becoming whole. Because mature love isn't about never being triggered again. It's about having the courage to stay present when you are, to breathe, to pause, to choose differently, one moment at a time. That's part of the process. You will stumble. You will take steps forward and then 2 steps back. But what matters is that now you hold the keys, you now have the map. And even if the terrain feels unfamiliar, you are no longer wandering blindly through the old patterns of your past. You now know that the habits and survival strategies that have accompanied you your whole life are not your destiny. They are not life sentences written into your character. They are simply your starting point, the place from which you can choose something different, something truer, something better, something worthy of the man you've become, not despite everything you've endured, but because of it. Carl Jung taught that the greatest potential of the human soul emerges not from denying the past, but from integrating it. When you accept that the scars are part of your story, they no longer chain you down. They become proof of your survival, markers of your courage, and raw material for your transformation. So here you stand, with the ability to choose, to live not as a boy apologizing for his existence, but as a man who knows that simply existing is already enough, and this man who survived, who grew, who chose healing over repetition, this man deserves more than scraps of affection. He deserves a love that celebrates him, not one that merely tolerates him, a love that sees him fully, not one that overlooks him in silence, a love that walks beside him as an equal, not one that keeps him small or chained to his past. That love exists, and it is not distant, not hidden. In some unreachable future. It is already circling closer to you the moment you begin to stand in your truth. Because, as Jung taught, when the inner self shifts, the outer world responds, and you exactly as you are right now, with your wounds, your history, and your hard-won wisdom are worthy of it, not when you're perfect, not when you've healed every scar, not when you've proven yourself beyond doubt, but now, in this very moment, because worth is not earned, it is remembered, and the man who remembers his worth becomes impossible to overlook.